in the middle of the Bagshot Park mansion's living room. Prince Edward pulled out a pitch-black iron chest. He slammed it straight down onto the glass tabletop. The teacups shook violently. The lid of the chest was flung open. Thousands of yellowed receipts were thrown, scattering into the air. The falling rain of paper crushed the forged £80 million land transfer deed Camilla had just thrown down. The Queen Consort, who was proudly crossing her legs, suddenly froze. The Luxembourg tycoons paled and stepped back. Tom Parker Bowles gasped for air, standing rooted to the spot, looking at the ironclad evidence lying right under his shoe heels. What earth-shattering secret did these thousands of receipts hide? How did Edward set a trap to force his stepmother to dig her own grave? Late November 2023. Queen Camilla's private office at Clarence House was flooded with the scent of lemon essential oil and expensive wood polishing wax. Right in the middle of the solid oak desk was a suede envelope. It was sealed with a layer of dark red wax. Unlike ordinary royal documents bearing the British coat of arms, the seal on this envelope was the symbol of a private financial conglomerate headquartered in Luxembourg. Everything outside the palace was still proceeding according to its inherent quiet schedule. King Charles was busy with diplomatic tours. The public saw the Queen Consort smiling, cutting ribbons to inaugurate medical centres. But inside this room, an underground agreement had just been sealed. By mid-March 2024, the office door was tightly closed. Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's biological son, walked up to the oil portrait hanging close to the bookshelf. He used 2 fingers to gently push the wooden frame. The painting slid to one side, revealing a state-of-the-art wall safe. When the 10-centimetre thick steel door popped open, the inside contained absolutely no pearl necklaces or heirloom crowns. The cramped space of the safe was stuffed tight with stacks of cash in the highest denominations wrapped tightly in waterproof nylon and dozens of cast gold bars with no identifying serial numbers. This was not legitimate personal property. It was an upfront deposit from foreign tycoons, marking the first step of a massive land acquisition scheme aimed directly at the core assets of the royal family. The goal of the Luxembourg tycoons was extremely clear. Bagshot Park Mansion. This place spans 50 acres, surrounded by ancient oak forests and holding hundreds of years of history. They did not buy land to live on. They wanted to level the historic gardens, dig tunnels through the bedrock to build an extremely lavish, self-contained resort. Here, there would be helipads hidden under the canopy of trees and mobile casinos catering to the ultra-rich without any tax agency prying. But in England, you cannot bring an excavator to bulldoze royal land just because you have money. Bagshot Park is currently the legal residence of Prince Edward. To brazenly steal this land, Camilla had to create a completely legal acquisition mechanism on paper. Imagine you are living in a house left by your ancestors. Suddenly, your stepmother broadcasts to the whole family that you are a useless freeloader, letting the house fall into ruin, termites eating away the foundation. After that, she brings a group of strangers calling themselves a charity fund, claiming they will spend money repairing the house to save the family legacy, but in reality, to tear down your house to build their hotel. And to legitimize it, she personally forges a power of attorney signed by the head of the family, forcing you to hand over the house. Camilla's mechanism operated exactly like that. She began spreading rumours through aides that Edward's family was financially incapable, letting the mansion severely deteriorate. Using the excuse of salvaging a national historic legacy facing the risk of collapse, Camilla stepped up to call for a sponsorship of £80 million from the so-called Luxembourg Heritage Conservation Fund. To firmly lock Edward's retreat, Camilla made an incredibly sophisticated move. She secretly ordered the forgery of a land use rights transfer deed. This paper was stamped with royal seals so accurate that it bypassed even senior lawyers, forcing Prince Edward to immediately relinquish the management rights of Bagshot Park to the Conservation Fund. This mechanism turned a blatant land grab into a highly noble act of heritage salvation before the public. This process of deprivation was not just on paper, but executed through three extremely decisive actions. The first action took place in early April 2024. In her office, Camilla directly called the two editors-in-chief of major newspapers in London. She did not state the accusations outright. She directed her private secretary to send them leaked internal document files. The document's contents detailed the repair costs for the leaking roof and the broken heating system at Bagshot Park, accompanied by implicitly loaded remarks about Edward's family leeching off taxpayers' money without knowing how to preserve their property. The result was that just 3 days later, a series of clickbait articles about the decline of Bagshot Park appeared simultaneously, creating a wave of public outrage aimed directly at Prince Edward. The second action took place in late April. Tom Parker Bowles drove a Porsche Cayenne sports car to a private club in the suburbs of London. He brought along a file of detailed zoning maps of the Bagshot Park estate. In the VIP room on the 3rd floor, Tom met with two representatives of the Luxembourg conglomerate. He spread the maps on the billiard table, pointing out the exact location where the fountain would be levelled for a secret tunnel and the area to chop down the oak forest to build a helipad. The negotiation ended with a handshake. The result was that very evening, another suitcase containing £500,000 in cash was transferred straight into the wall safe at Clarence House. The third action, also the most reckless one, took place in mid-May. Camilla used her special access rights to borrow the royal seal from the record storage room of Buckingham Palace, under the excuse of approving internal charity paperwork. She brought this seal back to her personal office, manually stamping a blazing red seal onto the pre-drafted land transfer deed, which contained the fully forged signatures of the royal estate management officials. This fake contract stipulated that Bagshot Park would be unconditionally handed over to the Luxembourg Heritage Conservation Organisation to manage for 99 years. The result of this action was that a perfect legal smokescreen had been erected, ready to crush any resistance from Edward's family. Everything had been smoothly arranged, paving the way for the excavators to advance onto the land. Throughout the process of Camilla frantically preparing the encasing net, there was a small detail completely overlooked by her. Over the past 20 years, Prince Edward had always been known as the quietest, most unnoticeable person among his siblings. He stayed away from all power struggles in the press, lived quietly at his mansion, and had never once spoken up to refute rumours aimed at him. Camilla mistook that silence as a manifestation of cowardice and weakness. She firmly believed that when facing a transfer deed stamped with the red royal seal and public pressure, Edward would obediently pack his bags and leave without daring to utter half a word. But little did she know, the roar of a predator starts from that very decades-long silence. In reality, over the past 20 years, all the maintenance and repair money for every brick and every tree branch at Bagshot Park did not take a single penny from the royal treasury as the press was proclaiming. Edward and his wife Sophie had used their own personal out-of-pocket money to pay for everything. More importantly, they kept everything. Every receipt for buying mortar, every bank transfer statement for the carpenter, every invoice for buying roses planted in the garden was sorted, wrapped in nylon and carefully stored in a dark space. This detail completely changed the nature of the chessboard. The Bagshot Park mansion was not a national burden waiting to be salvaged, but an independent fortress built with its owner's own money. When Camilla brought her troops to force the handover of the house, What ruthless resistance would she and Tom Parker Bowles face from a man who had kept his fangs hidden for 20 long years? Camilla did not merely crave the massive commission from the Luxembourg tycoon group. The Bagshot Park mansion held a cruel, symbolic meaning for her. For decades, Camilla had to live under the identity of a mistress shunned by the public, openly despised by members of Orthodox royal blood. Now, when the crown was already resting on her head, she wanted to exact a thorough psychological revenge. Stripping Prince Edward's mansion, kicking her brother-in-law's family out into the street was exactly how Camilla asserted absolute life and death power. She wanted to prove that those born with royal blood now had to bow down before the woman who once entered the palace through the back door. To materialize this ambition, Camilla carried out two extremely cold-blooded path-clearing actions. The first action aimed straight at the internal data system. In mid-March 2024, Camilla used her administrative management authority, directly ordering the Royal Property Office to cross Bagshot Park's name off the list of permanently protected royal residences. This mansion was transferred to the category of commercial properties pending reassessment. With just a stroke of the pen changing the land classification, she stripped away the legal shield protecting Edward's home. The second action was carried out directly by Tom Parker Bowles. In late March, Tom secretly flew to the Cayman Islands. At the office of a private law firm specializing in handling underground finances, he set up a chain of 3 shell companies. These companies had no employees, no business operations, possessing only a bank account number. These were the empty baskets prepared in advance to catch the consulting fee amounting to tens of millions of pounds from Luxembourg as soon as the Bagshot Park transfer deed was signed. Camilla and her son had finished establishing a closed-loop, blood-sucking pipeline ready to crush the lives of Edward's family in exchange for numbers in offshore bank accounts. Prince Edward and Princess Sophie stood at a completely opposite pole. Bagshot Park was not a piece of real estate for speculation or a commercial facility to change hands for a profit. It was a home, the place where they had personally raised their 2 children to adulthood, the place holding the family's honour and sweat for 20 long years. Edward was the quietest child of the late Queen Elizabeth II. He always stayed away from the infighting in the press, voluntarily stepping back to support his brother. But that humility had a red line no one was allowed to cross: the safety and integrity of the family home. The couple was determined to protect this mansion to the end, refusing to accept their sweat and tears being used as a sacrificial lamb for others' greed. They proved this steadfastness through practical actions. The moment the first articles smearing Bagshot Park's deterioration appeared, Sophie took immediate action. She did not call reporters to justify herself. She manually withdrew money from her personal trust fund, hiring the best artisanal stonemason team in Surrey. For many consecutive weeks, the public saw Princess Sophie wearing protective work clothes, directly standing to supervise the restoration of the mansion's west facade. She wanted to extinguish the freeloading rumours with brand new bricks paid for out of pocket. At the same time, Edward carried out a direct act of resistance on paper. When Camilla's office sent to Bagshot Park an internal memo titled "Voluntary Relocation Proposal," promising to grant them a smaller apartment in London in exchange for handing over the mansion, Edward did not reply via email. He took that entire stack of documents, shoving it straight into the paper shredder. He gathered the whole pile of shredded paper, put it into a white envelope, and sent it back to Camilla's desk at Clarence House without attaching any handwritten words. This razor-sharp silence pierced straight into the Queen Consort's ambition. Edward's resolute clinging directly blocked the path of the £80 million commission, turning the two sides into enemies who could not share the same sky. Tolerance was pushed to the limit early one morning in May 2024. The layer of fog on the Bagshot Park lawn had not yet dissipated. a glossy black armoured SUV screeched its brakes deafeningly, pulling to a halt right in front of the mansion's main gate. Tom Parker Bowles and two Luxembourg tycoons wearing grey suits forcefully pushed the iron gate open and walked in. They were not taking a stroll, nor did they ring the doorbell. They brought along laser measuring devices, strutting back and forth on Edward's lawn like bosses coming to inspect a construction project. The chubby Luxembourg tycoon took a drag of his cigar. He spat onto the lawn, then threw the half-burned cigar straight into the white rosebush that Princess Sophie had just personally pruned yesterday. The fragile petals caught fire and scorched black. Immediately after, Tom Parker Bowles stepped to the middle of the courtyard. He used the toe of his steel-toed leather shoe to kick extremely hard into the side of the solid marble fountain. An intricately carved piece of stone chipped off and flew out, falling onto the gravel ground. Tom turned to the two foreigners, jerking his chin to order in a booming voice deliberately meant for those inside the house to hear. "Level this place. Make a straight ramp down to the VIP parking garage." From the second-floor window, Sophie witnessed the entire humiliation. Her knuckles turned pale white from tightly gripping the curtain. Her face flushed red with indignation. Sophie spun around, intending to rush straight down to the front yard to settle the score with the crowd trampling on her efforts. But right at that moment, a firm hand tightly grabbed her arm. Prince Edward stood right behind in the room's darkness. His eyes were icy cold, without a single beam of emotion. He pulled his wife a step back from the window, his voice hoarse but razor-sharp, hissing through his teeth. "Don't." Edward held his wife's arm tightly because he saw through the intention behind Tom Parker Bowles' arrogance. This was not a simple land survey trip. This was a provocational trap set up in an extremely crude manner. If Sophie rushed down to the yard, screaming, cursing, or chasing away that crowd, the hidden camera in the SUV would record everything. That very afternoon, Camilla would release the tape to the press, creating an image of a crazy, out-of-control princess attacking and obstructing the well-meaning investors who wanted to salvage the heritage. The violent behavior would strip away all of their legal rights to the house. Instead of falling into the trap, Edward made a ruthless and decisive decision. That very night, when Tom and the tycoons had retreated, Edward personally drove the old Land Rover. He did not turn on the bright headlights, silently piercing through the fog-filled roads to head west. His destination was Gatcombe Park in Gloucestershire, the mansion of his older sister, Princess Anne. Anne was the only person in the royal family who always behaved with absolute toughness and practicality. In the cold, stone-paved basement underground, Anne did not speak a single superfluous word. She took a bunch of brass keys from her coat pocket, approaching to unlock a pitch-black iron chest blurred with the dust of time. The chest lid was opened. There were no jewels or crowns. The inside was filled with thousands of material purchase receipts, hundreds of bank statements with red stamps, and artisan rental contracts. This entire pile of yellowed papers was undeniable ironclad evidence, proving that Edward and his wife had personally spent £3 million out of pocket to maintain every breath of Bagshot Park over the past 2 decades. The decision to open this chest completely reversed the game board. The financial data would crush every fabrication about the Heritage Conservation Fund. Edward hugged the iron chest to bring back to his territory, silently casting the net, waiting for the day the wolf pack would throw themselves into the jaws of death. When the financial evidence was resting neatly in the iron chest, how would Edward use it to shatter the pride of Camilla and the tycoons right in the middle of his own living room? At 3 in the afternoon the next day, the tranquility of the Bagshot Park mansion was torn apart by the roar of engines. A convoy consisting of 3 glossy black armoured Range Rovers crunched their wheels on the gravel driveway, braking abruptly right next to the main stone steps. Camilla stepped out of the car first. She wore a burgundy silk cloak, wearing a chunky three-layer pearl necklace around her neck, her face held high, revealing extreme triumph. Following closely behind was Tom Parker Bowles, wearing a handcrafted tailored suit from Savile Row, and the two Luxembourg tycoons with alligator leather briefcases clamped tightly under their armpits. This invading army did not bother to knock or wait for the butler to greet them. They used force to push wide open the double oak doors standing over 3 meters tall, brazenly striding through the marble-paved foyer and heading straight into the main living room like people who had fully grasped the ownership rights. Inside the living room, Prince Edward and Princess Sophie were sitting across from each other by the brass-framed tempered glass tea table. Both wore simple, everyday attire, completely not looking like they were waiting for a life-or-death negotiation. Camilla approached the middle of the room and, without waiting for an invitation, arbitrarily leaned back into the most luxurious red velvet armchair. She crossed her legs, pulling out a thick document file from her Hermes handbag. Camilla's diamond ring-filled hand flicked forcefully. The land use right transfer deed bearing the bright red royal seal slid across the tempered glass surface, emitting a dry sound, stopping right near the edge of Edward's steaming teacup. Camilla's voice rang out cold, decisive, and fully imposing. She demanded that Edward's entire family pack up their personal belongings and get the hell out of this mansion before sunrise tomorrow morning. She emphasized every word that the heavy excavators were already parked outside the fence gate, just waiting for the order to bulldoze all barriers. Tom Parker Bowles and the two tycoons stood forming a barricade behind Camilla's back. Tom shoved his hands into his trouser pockets, his lips curling into a smug smirk, his eyes darting across the antiques in the room as if appraising objects about to be confiscated. The two foreigners crossed their arms over their chests, firmly believing that the ousted prince in front of them would have to obediently bow his head to hand over the keys when facing that paper of absolute legality. They were accustomed to using administrative pressure to suffocate those standing in their way. However, completely contrary to the panic or anger that this group of people expected, Edward did not reveal a single beam of negative emotion. He did not even bother glancing down at the £80 million transfer deed. Edward slowly looked up, staring straight into Camilla's eyes. His lips stretched into a cold, soulless smile. A completely empty smile, but one that radiated a bone-chilling cold, making the tycoon standing nearby instinctively shudder and take a half-step back because he sensed an invisible threat suffocating the air in the room. Edward stepped back, bending down under the tea table. When he stood up straight, his firm arms hoisted up a pitch-black iron chest, its brass-plated corners dulled by time. His wrists tensed, slamming the bottom of the chest onto the tempered glass surface with a deafening bang. The impact force was so strong that the bone china teacups bounced up, tea sloshing out and soaking the forged transfer deed. Not letting the crowd recover their wits, Edward reached out to flick the latch. He flung open the heavy chest lid. His two hands reached inside, scooping up thousands of yellowed receipts, hundreds of bank statements with red stamps, and tossed them, scattering into the air. The rain of paperwork fell all over the living room, covering the tabletop, crushing the paper with the royal seal that Camilla had just thrown down a few seconds ago. Edward stepped forward, his index finger poking straight into Tom Parker Bowles' face. His voice no longer held its usual calmness, but roared fiercely like a beast cornered for too long, now deciding to tear its enemy apart. He demanded them to open their eyes wide and look at the numbers printed on the papers. £3 million. Every single penny of that massive amount was withdrawn directly from his and his wife's personal trust funds and savings accounts. Edward growled each word, asserting that over the past 20 years, this place had never lacked money to buy a brick, had never had to beg for a single spare penny from the state treasury, and certainly never needed any rotten heritage conservation fund from Luxembourg to come to its salvation. This undeniable financial evidence completely stripped bare the heritage-saving facade that Camilla had taken the trouble to build to deceive the public and legitimize the land grab. The two Luxembourg tycoons were seasoned merchants. The moment they saw the names of local contractors and personal transfer receipts carpeting the floor, their brains immediately analyzed the risk. They realized they had been roped by Camilla into an extremely crude and easily exposed asset appropriation fraud. Getting entangled in a land dispute with clear payment evidence involving a royal member would draw in the investigation of the Financial Intelligence Unit. Their underground wealth could not endure this scrutiny. The two foreigners paled and, without a word to each other, automatically stepped back 3 paces, widening the distance from Camilla and her son as if dodging an infectious disease. Tom Parker Bowles sweated profusely, his chest heaving as he gasped for air, his eyes darting constantly, searching for an escape route upon seeing his allies fleeing. Camilla was now in utter panic. Her perfect plan was smashed to pieces right before her eyes. The intertwining of indignation and fear made her lose control. Camilla swung her arm to knock the entire tea tray onto the wooden floor, the sound of shattered porcelain ringing out piercingly. She lunged toward the tabletop, her 2 hands clumsily clawing, intending to tear up the nearest stack of receipts. Her mouth screamed frantically, ordering Tom to use physical force to drag Edward out of the room immediately. Right at the moment, Tom Parker Bowles clenched his fists, leaning over the glass table, intending to swing his arm to attack. Edward stepped back close to the fireplace mantel. His hand quickly pulled an old-generation magnetic tape from his breast pocket, its plastic casing yellowed. He firmly pressed the tape into the slot of the vintage recording player placed on the marble mantel and pressed the play button hard. The sound of mechanical gears turning their first rounds was followed by the hissing of old-decade recording technology. Immediately after, the majestic, slow voice, filled with the absolute power of the late Queen Elizabeth II, rang out, echoing against the 4 walls. She issued a clear decree, permanently forbidding all commercial interference and all outside investment projects in the Bagshot Park heritage area. But the tape did not end there. A screeching static cut across. Following right after was a shrill voice full of smugness and calculation, none other than the voice of Camilla, secretly recorded 10 years ago. In that low-quality audio recording, Camilla was laughing, admitting in detail the plan to use the cover of nature conservation funds to funnel royally managed land to foreign money laundering groups in order to split untaxed commission percentages. All vitality was instantly drained from Camilla's face. The expensive makeup powder could not hide her skin turning pale, white like a corpse. Her legs went weak, no longer having the strength to support her body weight, causing the Queen Consort to collapse completely into the velvet armchair. Her eyes widened in terror, her pupils glued to the recording machine, slowly turning each loop of tape as if witnessing a death sentence being pronounced. The Luxembourg tycoons understood that everything was over. Corruption evidence involving the audio of the late Queen was something that would trigger the involvement of domestic intelligence agencies. Without hesitating for another split second, the 2 heavy-set men did a 180-degree turn. They shoved each other, scrambling frantically to flee toward the main door, escaping the giant's legal quagmire tightly sucking in Camilla and her son. Right at this moment, from the dim darkness of the long corridor connecting straight to the main living room, a silhouette slowly stepped into the light. King Charles III was present. His complexion was pitch black, like a charged cloud before a massive storm. The muscle bundles on his face twitched continuously, a testament to the utmost fury that had pent up to the point of overflowing. He had stood there for a very long time, missing not a single gesture, missing not a single deceitful word. King Charles strode straight forward. Not a word. Not a chance. His arms swung up. The keyring snapped. Camilla tumbled down, her hands clawed at the paper. Charles turned his back and walked away. The facade was shattered. The key bearing the Royal Treasury coat of arms, the symbol of the Queen Consort's supreme financial power, fell with a clatter onto the oak surface. Camilla lay sprawled on the floor, her two knees rubbing against the very receipts she had just intended to tear up, her elaborately styled hair now drooping, obscuring half her face. Tom Parker Bowles witnessed his mother collapsing miserably under the toe of the monarch's shoe. His face was drained of every drop of blood. The survival instinct crushed all fake arrogance. He bowed his face, shrank his shoulders, gradually backing toward the door and slinking away from Bagshot Park in ultimate humiliation, leaving his mother kneeling amidst the pile of corruption evidence. When the greedy wolf pack has been completely crushed beneath the wheels of truth, how will the survivors rearrange the dynasty's order of power? Immediately after stripping Camilla's keyring, King Charles III reached into the inner lining of his felt coat. He pulled out an old sheepskin scroll. The bright red wax sealing the outside bore the symbol of the British coat of arms. He stepped forward, placing this document straight into Prince Edward's hands. This parchment scroll was a permanent sealing decree. It officially confirmed the absolute, inviolable control of Edward and his wife over the entire territory of Bagshot Park. No one, not even the Queen Consort, had the right to demand they leave or interfere in the management of this place. Edward stood silently, right in the middle of the cluttered living room. His hand tightly gripped the parchment scroll, his knuckles pressed firmly against the red wax. He did not smile. He did not celebrate victory. Sophie slowly stepped up close behind her husband's back. She gently rested her chin on his shoulder, her cold, sharp gaze directed down at the floor. Beneath their feet, Camilla was still kneeling on the oak floor. The expensive silk cloak was covered in tea and dirt. The Royal Guard team entered the living room to clean up the messy pile of papers. They stepped right over Camilla's head, completely ignoring her presence. From that moment on, Camilla officially lost everything. She was banned from the royal investment funds and was not allowed to sign off on a single penny of the budget. Before the public, she still wore the crown, still had to stand waving on the palace balcony during state ceremonial events. But when the doors of Buckingham Palace closed, she was merely a soulless shadow. She was under house arrest within the walls of Clarence House, permanently losing the practical power to manipulate the dynasty.
Prince Edward's counterattack overturned the power order that had existed for many years at the palace. This terrifying silence brought along a colossal question about the true power structure of the dynasty. The fact that Edward collected every single receipt for 20 years to deliver a fatal blow at the exact deciding moment proved he possessed an incredibly cold-blooded, calculating capability. Will the event at Bagshot Park turn him into a new underground force, silently manipulating the entire royal financial system from the shadows? Or did the recent act of opening the iron chest push him out into the light, turning him into the next elimination target of other factions? From another perspective, the public must look straight at the truth about a woman full of ambition like Camilla. She had endured the shunning for 4 decades just to climb to the pinnacle of power.
Would a person with such ruthless endurance easily accept living the rest of her life as a puppet figure? Is today's miserable collapse on the Bagshot Park floor the end of her reign, or is it merely a pause before a new storm of revenge is activated? When backed into a corner, what tricks were the Queen Consort, stripped clean of financial power, used to regain her status? This story exposes a harsh survival rule of the elite. In a system operated by greed and deceit, the most terrifying person is not the one loudly making threats. The most terrifying person is the one who knows how to keep silent. Silent to collect evidence, silent to conceal preparation, and silent to wait for the prey to step right into the blade's position. If you held in your hands the iron chest containing the evidence of your enemy's crimes, would you release it immediately to shatter their plot from the beginning, or would you coldly wait for the exact ripe moment to expose them before the highest judge, as Edward did? Please comment your perspective right below. Subscribe to the channel today so we can continue to decode top-secret financial files and uncompromising internal purges behind the closed doors of the global ultra-rich.